Hello and welcome, Roger Connect, President of Universal Accounting Center, and this is the podcast dedicated to accounting professionals to help you have the premier accounting firm. Why? Because this is intended to give you the confidence and competence you need as you run your business to have the premier accounting firm in your area. So building the premier accounting firm as a podcast has guests each and every week where we explore various things that you can be doing in your business to in fact address things that may range from marketing, selling, pricing, onboarding clients, working with the clients, retaining the clients, but also such things as staff training as well as the culture that you have within your company. So with all those things in mind, I invite you to listen to our other episodes as well as subscribe to the podcast and get the most out of this experience. Now for today, I happen to have a guest that you're going to just love. Ted Paulsen happens to be both an attorney by trade, but now the CEO of Islecticon and Blue Novus, two companies that you're going to be learning about today. But in this conversation, some things that you're going to take away from this are going to be very helpful to your business. Now, Ted, first of all, as we talk about your companies, you've got an attorney background, you've got this business Islecticon where you do media training, you've got Blue Novus where you're providing trainings and so forth. Tell us a little bit about those just to give the audience an understanding of what you do.
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Well, first with Islecticon. Islecticon is basically a learning platform company. So we work with different subject matter experts, and then we'll take their expertise, we'll put it online in a manner that we can deliver it to a wide audience. So we've worked with companies where they used to just do live training. We'll actually take and capture that live training, put it online, put it in a format that we can deliver it to more people. And in the process of building Islecticon, one of the areas of subject matter expertise that we went after was mental health, and that's Blue Novus. So Islecticon provides the platform and provides basically the infrastructure and the operations for Blue Novus. And then we have, in Blue Novus, we have a call center 24/7 where people can reach in when they need help in the moment. It really focuses on situational mental health issues as opposed to clinical mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we'll do is we train our staff to de-escalate and listen. And that's what they do for people who call in with Blue Novus. And then if they need counseling or therapy, then we act as a concierge. So we'll actually connect them with counselors and therapists.
Very good.
Based on their need, based on what they're looking for. So they don't have to go through the phone book or go online to try to find somebody that would be a fit. We've already done that. We've vetted these people, and then we'll refer them to somebody that will work with their insurance and provide them with the help that they need.
Very good. Now, there's two reasons why I find this very interesting. One, a lot of the individuals that work in the accounting world actually have staff, they have employees, and rightfully so are going to have issues that within that culture, individuals have situations, so much so that you might even say drama in their lives that may benefit from these types of services. But ideally, it's essentially this idea of in order for someone to be productive and effective, they need to be in a good mental state. The second thing is that there's a lot of people that are sole entrepreneurs. As accounting professionals, they're running their businesses, doing great, but it's just them, and they're dealing with some of the stresses that are involved with running and operating, growing a business. And as they're dealing with those things of maybe it's imposter syndrome, perhaps it's the stresses of how do I portray myself that I'm not an imposter as to my services. There's a lot of things that I'm sure you're addressing and helping just because of the fact that they're day-to-day things that we all struggle with as human beings.
Yeah, that's really the beauty of the care center and really how we came about with Blue Novus is trying to meet people where they're at. Mm-hmm. So with sort of standard services that are out there, you may call and you may say, hey, I have a need, and they'll set an appointment with a counselor or a therapist in 3 months or 6 months. And with COVID, that got even worse, where
Yes.
the time period and the waiting period was quite extensive. In a lot of cases, people are dealing with situational needs, meaning 100% of us will have mental and emotional issues through the year, where we just don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to manage it. We don't know who to talk to. Sometimes we might not want to talk to a spouse or a partner. We might not want to let our kids in on the secret of what's going on with us. We might not have a trusted confidant that we feel really comfortable speaking with. So with the care center, we provide them with an opportunity to just reach in and say, hey, I need some help. And in order to facilitate that, one of the things that we found is a lot of people like to text. So we set up to be able to take texts, and we also set up to take calls. And about 70% of our engagements are text engagements. And if you think about it, if you've got a problem and you're dealing with a mental health issue, the difficulty of picking up that phone and dialing a number and saying, I need some help. Or sitting down one-on-one and me saying, Roger, I need some help. I need to confide something in you. That can be pretty difficult to take that first step. But everybody is so used to this that if they can just take their hands and punch in and say, can I talk to you? And a response comes back and says, absolutely, what's going on? That's what we do at Blue Novus. And that's where we can, if we can get these people upstream before we drop into crisis, before we drop into something that is really heavy, and they know that we're there to help, the more frequently they reach out and ask for help, the more we keep them healthy in the moment, but also we've developed a relationship so when something does happen, if they do go through something that's a crisis, rather than scrambling and trying to find a number or who do I call, who can I talk to, they go, you know what, I got a friend. I've already talked to the folks at Blue Novus. I'm going to reach out to Blue Novus.
You know, the texting I can understand simply because in our world today, there's some anonymity that exists with the text message, and so people can be a little bit more vulnerable. Honestly, in social media, they're actually a little bit more direct. And so what we're finding is in text messages, they're probably able to be a little bit more open, more transparent, and more willing to extend themselves and ask for that support. I find this fascinating. Literally just before this conversation, I was meeting with a client, and as we're working on their business, I work with business owners and help them with their companies. One of the things that was interesting is this particular situation was such that they were having family issues that were overwhelming to them and were causing them to not be able to focus and work on their business. So my last meeting, literally before this conversation, consisted of us talking through and working out some of the things that they were dealing with related to their family and their spousal relationship that was impeding them from being able to focus on their business. So just before this, I was dealing with this, so I can relate.
Well, it's something that happens routinely. And if you think about it, we all need somebody at some point. And particularly, you mentioned you work with business owners. When you think about entrepreneurs and you think about who they reach out to and who they interact with, you're in a bubble, because a lot of times you might be a sole proprietor, or you might have just one or two partners, and you might not always be comfortable approaching them and telling them, hey, I've got an issue. Who do you reach out to?
That's right.
Who's there to be your sounding board? One of the things that's extremely valuable is, and we get into this, but coaching. I mean, if you don't have somebody in the organization, who is your coach? Who can you reach out to? Who can you interact with? Because the whole premise of the Care Center and of Blue Novus is people need people. So there's a lot of technology out there, and there's a lot of places we can go and we can say, hey, this is a really cool tool. And this tool allows us to use AI, and it's going to direct me over here, and it's going to take me over there. And it's very impersonal. Yeah. Now, there's value in those things. But when you really get down to the nuts and bolts, people need people. And so if they have somebody they can talk to, if they also can be talked to themselves. So for example, you're in working with clients and customers. Some people would put up their hands and say, I don't know. What do I do? How do I manage this issue? I've never been in a family business before. I don't know how to navigate these things. I don't know what to tell you what to do. Where do you go then? Do you just shut off? And on the other hand, you also don't want to say, well, I'm Roger, the counselor or therapist, so tell me about your problems.
Yeah.
What did your dad do when you were a kid?
Yeah, so as you're describing this, I'm reflecting on some of the memories I have. Early on in my management career, I found that in addition to managing the department and dealing with the business-related things of the department, I became a marriage counselor, I became a child therapist, I became a grief counselor, I became basically all these other things that technically I didn't really have formal training in, but I had that listening ear. We're as human beings, social creatures. We sometimes need sympathy or empathy. We need to feel heard or at least acknowledged. And so it's very natural, but at the top where you're working with entrepreneurs, it's lonely at the top. And to have some way to kind of reach out, that's, I think, very helpful. But what you're describing is at least a very personable kind of an approach.
Yeah, and that's really key, right, is telling them that we're here to listen. The other thing that we want to do is we want to help them be better managers. We want to help them be better business owners. So we have listening courses. How do we listen? How do we sit down and say what's going on with you and reserve judgment to be able to just be open to what happens and to what occurs to the person, what occurs to us. And that's part of what we do is we train them in listening skills. The other thing that we're trying to do through our leadership training is we actually will go in and we'll help people understand using self-determination theories and thoughts of how do we create this. We all have this based on self-determination theory. We all want to belong. And we all want to feel like we have choice. And we all want to feel that we're confident. And so how do you do that? How do you say to the individual or to the person, okay, you have the ability to make a choice, you are competent, and you do belong. Those are really the foundational items that, as a business owner, that helps you as a business owner from one standpoint of saying, I understand my basic human needs, but I also understand the needs of my employees. Am I giving them that autonomy? Am I giving them those things that they need to be successful working with me or for me? And do I take that out to my clients so that they know that I'm available to them? Because you know their basic human needs, and it creates a better environment for employees. It creates a better environment for working with clients.
Yeah, we have in my coaching division a program called the STAR program, and it's where we actually do what's referred to as creating a culture of accountability. And it's where we define very clear expectations of the employee and try and help them realize what it is that they need to be doing in the business that we're paying them to actually accomplish. But part of that is this whole idea of they need to have that sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. But when you were talking about these listening skills, one of the things I do remember is there needs to be a genuine interest that you can exhibit through the questions that you're asking. If you can show that curiosity, people can be relaxed because they feel as if they're not only being heard, but someone actually is interested in them. And all of a sudden they start to feel relaxed. If you can provide that safe environment where there's non-judgment going on, they'll tend to open up a little bit more and start to reveal themselves and become vulnerable. And at that point, they may be open to and entertain some of the suggestions to maybe work through whatever you're offering. But it's that cliche-ish statement that's so true that Stephen Covey said of no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, that I think matters most. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. And as we train people on what we call innate listening, innate listening is all about sitting down and saying, first off, I'm going to be present for you. My attention is on you. And for an attorney, for an entrepreneur, for a business owner, it's hard stuff because we're used to doling out advice. Every place we go with clients, when you're a professional, an accountant, an attorney, you're going out and you're doling out advice.
You're talking.
And people are planning on you. Boom, boom, boom. What do you have for me? Give me something. And we love to be on the stage. I love to be on the stage and say, I got something for you. Here's the nugget. But if you practice innate listening, you say, okay, first off, I'm just going to be present. And as I'm present and I sit here with you, then I'm going to be curious, to your point, right? Roger, what's going on? What's happening? Then I'm going to be still, meaning I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to let you go. I'm going to reserve my judgments. I'm going to put away anything that I might have brought into the conversation. And then I'm just going to be open to the moment to see what comes. That's innate listening. And if leaders can take that on, it's extremely valuable in the workplace. It's extremely valuable in the home. When you think about that and you think if you've had a teenager in your home, How often do you sit down with a teenager and you're just present and curious? Or alternatively, in my case, am I present and overbearing? This, and this. Here's what you need to do. Here's where you got to go. Here's what time you need to be in. Stop seeing her. Stop doing this. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm here for you. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen for a minute. And I'm going to withhold my judgments. Because I bring so many of those with me as a father. And because I feel responsibility or I feel ownership even. It's like, how do you set that aside for a minute and say, just talk to me, and I'm going to reserve judgment? It's an incredibly powerful skill, an incredibly difficult one to develop. It takes a ton of practice.
It does. And I can admit that when I was first married, I thought that the idea of when someone was volunteering an issue or a situation was for me to resolve that problem or situation. It took years of learning and understanding that honestly, it's doing exactly as you described. Sitting back, listening, letting them express themselves, share their situation. And honestly, a lot of times as they talk, they'll find the solution just in talking it through. They'll come to their own conclusion. They'll figure out what they need to do next. But the best question at the end of the day is, so share with me what you're going to do now. What are you going to do about this? And have them talk through what they feel the solution is, because they need to own it. They're going to be the ones having to act on it. So very good advice. I love this. So what's a common myth about what we're describing today? What's a common myth that you run into as you're maybe explaining this service or someone is expressing interest in the service? What do they misunderstand?
Well, I don't know that it's a myth, but in the workplace generally, mental health is taboo. There's a stigma. We don't talk about it. We don't raise the issue. We don't come in and say, I'm suffering. Here's what's going on in my life. We suffer in silence. We suck it up. And because people say, no, you're a tough guy, you're supposed to suck it up. Particularly if you own your own business or if you're in leadership positions, it's like, no, I'm expected to suck it up. The employees might have the ability to go out and, in the old days, be at a water cooler or wherever, and they can complain and they can get some of the stuff off their chest, and there's some things that can go on. But how does a business owner do that? How does a business owner go in and sit by the water cooler? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And so what ends up happening is we shut down this conversation around mental health because we don't want people to know. And so that's the biggest thing for us at Blue Novus to overcome. And what our mission is to really overcome that stigma in the workplace that exists around talking about mental health. Why can't we come in and have a more open discussion?
So there's a coin here, two-sided coin. One, I agree with you. There's definitely a openness that needs to be created for people to be able to express themselves and be comfortable revealing that they're stressed, depressed, and so forth, that they're dealing with these trials. On the flip side, what's to avoid the pity party of always having an excuse and always coming up with reasons for not performing and not doing well? Where's the balance in that?
Well, you have to look at it and say, what's the underlying problem? If they're not being productive, is it because they're dealing with a mental health issue? Is it because something else is going on? Is there a clinical need? We all have to perform. You all have to find that motivation, right? And the whole point of self-determination is to help them find motivation intrinsically,
purpose,
as opposed to extrinsic motivation. Because if they do, they're going to be more motivated. It doesn't necessarily let them off the hook, but what it does is it opens up the conversation to understand what's potentially impeding them getting their job done. If there's something that we can deal with, if there's something we can help them with, then the employer is going to be better off because we've gotten to the root of the problem. If we get down to the root of the problem, we find, you know what, it's just this person doesn't have any interest in this job. They don't have any reason for being here. They're never going to perform. Let's give them the opportunity to succeed someplace else because it might not be with us.
That's
and
right.
That happens frequently because it's the employer and the employee have to align. And it's one of the important reasons why you should have a purpose statement or a mission statement. You should have core values, and you should talk to your employees about those so that you can start aligning these so that they can find purpose and meaning in what they're doing in their job.
Do they fit? It's the cliche-ish thing of, are the right people on the right seats in the bus kind of analogy.
Certainly.
Yeah. Now, there is a distinction between situational and systemic issues. Some people, they have poor coping skills. They make poor life choices and so forth. But then there's also situational things. A health situations arise, maybe a relationship issue's developed, and it's going to pass, where the systemic tends to be perpetual. Talk about those two distinctions. Is there a difference between the two in your mind?
Yeah, a very big difference. We know that there's roughly 20 to 25% of everybody has a diagnosable mental health issue in their life. They're going to face a clinical or systemic sort of an issue. They should reach out for professional help. There's nothing wrong with seeking professional help. Mm-hmm. It's something that's available to them that they should reach out and use. Situational is more, I really just need to listen to somebody in the moment. Now, we can quickly really ferret that out if we practice listening skills and we start understanding what's really going on with you. What are you really dealing with? It could be some deep-seated issues that they need to resolve and work through. It could be issues at home that really have nothing to do with work and what we're doing, but we find out that something's going on at home. How do we help that situational issue? And if that's something where it's beyond a situational issue, where it's systemic, again, they may need some professional help. The key is people understanding that it's okay to share, because if we're honest with each other, and if we wanted to sit here right now and air our dirty laundry, we could. And people might go, Roger had that issue? Roger had that problem? Ted divulged that in front of people? I mean, you got to think, we've all got these little things that we keep packed away.
Oh, yeah.
That we don't want to reveal to anybody.
They're the skeletons, right?
And they're embarrassing sometimes, and it makes us vulnerable. It doesn't feel comfortable. And how do we protect those things? We all have them. So why can't we talk just a little bit more openly about them? And I'm not saying you have to lay everything out, but why not come in and say, you know what, I had a problem. My business was broke. We were broke. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. It happened to me. Mm-hmm. And to be able to share that and talk to people, it helps you deal with those issues. It helps you say, you know what, I'm going to frame them. I'm going to put them in a framework that where they really belong. And that is, I can learn something from those. I gained something from those. It wasn't all horrible. I don't have to relive them every day and beat myself up, but I can learn and move on.
Yeah, there's a difference between they're defining who I am or they're an experience that I've had. And that's, I think, very important. And what you just addressed, I think, brings up the next question, which is there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. What you're referring to, having had experiences, empowers a person to have empathy in a conversation. In fact, maybe I need to back up a little bit more. Sympathy and empathy are distinct. How would you understand the two words?
Well, sympathy, I think, is being able to comprehend to me what you're saying. But I don't really understand because I've never experienced it. For me, and again, you can find all sorts of different definitions. For me, empathy is when I really can relate and somehow feel what you're likely feeling and really gauge it. And it's for people who've had experiences in their life, there's just some things that I can't comprehend. Mm-hmm. I can certainly understand, but until I've experienced it, and something that comes to mind is talking to somebody who's had either a near death or suffered a heart attack, for example. They overcome it, and then everything after that point is, you know what? When I feel some pain or I feel some pressure, I immediately go to this place where I am
Is it happening
in
again?
panic.
Yes.
And while I can say, I understand what you're talking about there, oh yeah, I'm sure that's really bad, I don't really know what it's like, fortunately, to say, I've been on the brink and then come back. I can't comprehend that. Now, can I have empathy for a person in that situation? Yeah, I think I can have empathy, but I can't really go all the way to the point of saying, I really can put myself in your shoes because I haven't lived that.
Yeah, the sympathy is definitely that genuine interest in the situation. I feel for you. I see that this is a painful, emotional, stressful thing, and I feel for you. I'm sorry, and what can I do to help? Empathy is, I've gone through that journey. I've been there. I'm on the other side of it perhaps, and I have some experience where I can empathize with you, and maybe I have something to offer because I have a perspective that uniquely we share now, because I also have had that experience. And typically that can be a very bonding moment for someone to realize you've been on this same path and you're further down it than I am, and maybe you have something to offer me that I can either learn from. If nothing else, you can compassionately relate, and maybe I can lean on you a little bit more. And so that empathy can be very powerful. And I bring that up only to say that as we volunteer or even bring up some of the challenges we've faced in this human existence, maybe what we're doing is actually revealing where we can help someone the most because we've been there before. It's not sympathy I'm bringing to the table, it's empathy. And in your case, just as an entrepreneur, there have been challenges that I've likewise faced where you're paying the vendors, you're paying the different people, you're paying the employees, and as an employer, there's nothing left for you, and you're running the business, working all these hours, doing everything that you can to keep it alive for naught. I mean, there's just nothing there. And for a business owner to realize that they're not the only ones that have gone through that someone can empathize with that emotion, that's unique because the employees can't relate and other people may not be able to empathize, but a fellow business owner that says, yeah, I remember those years where it was lean and tough and I had to go home to my spouse and say, yeah, I'm the owner and I'm working this hard and I'm working long hours, but I have nothing to bring home to pay the bills. That's tough and that's genuine. So just as an example, I think that's a great illustration of genuine stress, trials, and life, but yep, we're working through those things.
Well, I like what you said about bonding. Understanding, I think it facilitates that bonding, that belonging piece. It gets you closer in that belonging. You're part of a club. It might be a club that you don't want to be a part of,
But you're in it.
but you are. And if I can find somebody who kind of can relate, it's meaningful. It's when you think of being a business owner, to your point about going home and saying, hey, I'm not bringing anything home. Sometimes it's really isolating as a business owner when you've started something and you have employees, and sometimes you don't know that they fully appreciate that while you're taking a check, I'm writing it. It's not only that there's just nothing left for me to take home. Mm-hmm. You're taking something home because I'm writing the check. And sometimes that comes back later and it's like, hey, you know what, I've been here, I'm owed this, I'm owed that, and you ought to be taking care of me, and you sit there and scratch your head and say, I don't think you really bond with me. I don't think you really understand where I've been. And in trying to keep this thing alive when things were really tough. And it's just interesting because as you say that, that's what occurs to me because I've had that experience, and it's always hard to balance that after the fact and say, you know what, I realize I did that, but all these people around me are helping make me successful, and helping this business thrive, and there's even a balancing there.
Oh yeah, no. As you're sharing that story, I'm remembering that I've had those conversations where the employee is coming asking for more and they want the raise. It's that year anniversary. They feel like they're maybe not entitled, but they're expecting something more, right? I've been here, I've got the tenure. What are you going to give me more? And ego steps in. How dare they? They don't know how hard we've had it these last number of months. And like you're describing, I paid your darn check and I didn't pay this bill. I had to call this company or tell this vendor that I have to push the payables for a period of days or weeks. I had to go home with less money. I took a pay cut because of all this. And here's the arrogance of this person. And I have to backtrack and go, you know what? If no one else, they have to be their advocate. they have to be the one person that stands up for themselves. And I can't fault them for asking. And they are putting forth their effort, and by darn, they're sticking with it. They have caught the vision, perhaps, of the business, and they want to be a part of it. So I don't fault them for asking for more. They don't have the perspective to know that there are these challenges and so forth, and I don't want them to be burdened with those things. And you're right. It's a moment where you have to kind of take a breath and just pause a moment and realize through their lens, their perspective, I would expect them to ask for something more. And I don't fault them for that. And I'm happy to do what I can to make it so that they are appreciated and feel like they leave this conversation with a win. So, yeah, you kind of swallow your ego for a moment and put things in perspective and then realize they're their own advocate and they've got to be doing this. I expect them to do this.
And they're deserving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it ends up being kind of, it really tears you apart. Because you're writing the check because they deserve it.
They did work.
And they're hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the values of having somebody else that you can communicate with, because you can't communicate this effectively and you really can't have a meaningful conversation a lot of times with employees around that. You have to be able to reach out. I have to be able to go, Roger, you know what, here's what I'm dealing with, here's what I'm faced with. And you say, you know what, I've had a similar experience. And now all of a sudden, it gives me the ability to process it in a meaningful way so that you can say, oh, you know what, I know better how to deal with this. I know how I can address the issue, and this is what I'm going to be able to do for my employees. So I love what you just brought up, and that is this connection, right, where you should have a coach, you should have a counselor, you should have an accountability partner.
Yes.
Somebody that you can just bounce ideas off and vent when you need to vent and share when you need to share and listen when somebody needs to chat.
I think you just answered my next question, which is what advice would you give to the business owner? And I think you just gave it. We need to find some place where we can find a vulnerable spot where we can be transparent, but also get the coaching, the advice, the accountability. When we're running our businesses, we want to do something. It'd be nice to kind of report or declare that to someone and have them hold us accountable for whether or not we've done what we said we would do in the business. So I do like that. I think that's obviously I do business coaching for a living. So at the end of the day, I think it does play a very important part in success. So that's very, very true. What's a lesson you've learned in the businesses you've run, what you're doing now, that you feel business owners would benefit from knowing?
I would say one of the lessons I've learned is being kind of the cards are stacked against me a little bit by being a trained attorney, I was an individual athlete involved in an individual sport where it all came down to me. It wasn't team this, that, or the other. And when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times you're putting a big burden on yourself, a lot of expectations. Mm-hmm. You're also saying, I can do it, I need to do it, I can do it alone. You know, I'm going to just put all this effort into this and I'm going to bust through and make this thing happen. And as you do that, sometimes we end up getting caught up a little bit in what you've referenced before is kind of that ego thing. And I know this from personal experience because I have this huge ego, right? Where I think that, oh, I can work this out, I can do this, I can do that. The advice would be find a way to check that ego at the door a little bit and understand when it is really ego talking. And again, you do that through this innate listening, really, by shutting your mouth and listening and just saying, what's going on in my head? What am I thinking? What barriers am I putting into place? Because I do it every day. I mean, my ego gets in my way every single day where I'm saying, I just put a rock in front of me. And for no reason. It doesn't have to be there. So find a way that you can say, how do I test my ego? How do I see whether or not that's blocking me from getting me where I want to go and what I need to do? Because most of the time, if you can move that thing out of the way, you find that there's a whole myriad of people around you that are very interested in your success. And if you can just get out of your own way, they're going to find a way to make things happen. It happens at Blue Novus every day. It happens at Lecticon every day, where if I can finally get myself out of the equation, that things come together because they want autonomy. They want to be shown as capable. And as we let them do that, then all of a sudden I find that we're all really working together. We're rowing in the same direction instead of me rowing really hard one way and all the team is kind of either going like this because they think, oh, Ted thinks he's got it all under control. And it's like, no, you're in the boat. You're responsible for that oar. You're responsible for that one. And I'm going to let you do what you're going to do and not come out and stamp you down because my ego says I've got to go, which most entrepreneurs do. I got to put my hands all over it. They've got to see my fingerprints.
Yes.
If they don't see my fingerprints, I'm losing control. It's a tough thing to go when you're scaling a business, right? From the fingerprint to say an entrepreneur, sit back just a little bit. We're entering into a different era, different phase where we're going to start growing and letting people do their job.
So there's two huge things that I heard you mention that I want to tap into. The first is the difference between confidence and ego. How would you describe that?
Oh, I think that there's a wonderful book out there, The Fearless Mind by Craig Manning, which I really like on this topic. And in that book, he just talks about the differences. It turns into ego when we bring in comparison. It's confidence when we just feel good about our ability. And I really like that definition. It works the other end too when we talk about pessimism as well.
Yeah.
It's when you bring the equation in and say, I'm going to compare. So, and there's two things that we can compare with. The first we can compare with is say, you know what, Roger's got a nicer suit than I do. He's more handsome. He's got this great beard, you know. And now I'm getting into an ego sort of a mindset, right? Where I'm thinking I have to compare favorably in my mind to Roger, right? It's confident if I just say, you know what, I love my bald head.
Love the bald head.
Save a lot of money because I just shaved my own head. And I'm just confident in who I am.
That's right.
The second comparison is to your ideal self, because that can be just as problematic or more so than comparing to somebody else. Because if you envision yourself and have this ideal of, I should be this, I should be doing that, I should be further along, I should have more money, I should be better in my business, I should be better at doing this. That also is extremely bad position to put yourself in. You take ego out of it when you stop comparing yourself to your ideal self too. And that takes a lot of work because you have to just start saying, I am confident in who I am right now and where I'm at. And I know that I can get someplace else. But it doesn't mean that I'm less than, it doesn't mean that I'm inadequate, it doesn't mean that I've failed being in the position where I am right now. I can always advance, but I'm good with who I am. And we refer to that in Blue Novus as emotional prosperity.
Okay.
Of being in that position where you're just saying, you know what, I'm good. And I know what I'm doing and I'm confident in that.
I like that. No, when I hear ego, I hear arrogance. The fact that you're not willing to listen, you're not teachable, you're not humble, that arrogance creeps in with ego, and it's a negative space in my personal opinion. So I liked how you were describing the comparisons and so forth. If comparison causes someone to be motivated, if comparison causes a person to strive for something to better themselves, then I think it's a healthy thing. When comparison becomes a depression, something that is discouraging, then it's no longer serving a good purpose. So those are some of the complementary things to that. The next thing that I was alluding to is delegation. You were talking about the fingerprints on everything. Really getting to a point where you move beyond, if it needs to be done right, it has to be done by me, to where you can train and delegate and honestly find yourself surrounded by people that have better skills than you, that can do it better than you. You're not the best or the expert at everything. There are certainly things that someone else can do better than you. Well, do you pay them, employ them, hire them, and surround yourself by them to, if nothing else, take care of it or elevate you to that next level? So what's your opinion on delegation?
Entrepreneurs, attorneys, accountants have a really difficult time delegating because they think they have this education, they think that they have this knowledge base that others just don't have. It's really difficult to get over that. And speaking from, again, personal experience, you do have to learn to trust. You do have to try it out, which is really a challenge to say, okay, I'm going to turn this over. So I'm still in a position where I cannot hire an attorney. I don't do routine legal work anymore. But when something comes across my desk and it has to do with the law, I end up taking it on. Should I be doing that? I probably shouldn't. But I just feel comfortable in my abilities to handle it. I will know I've arrived when I call up an attorney and say, would you read this contract or draft this contract for me? That has not happened yet. But I think that you have to look for areas where you do feel like, you know what, I've got some vulnerability, and start with those. So as we sit here today, Ed's producing this program, right? I can't do what Ed does. Ed is great at that. I have no
Thank you,
problem.
Happy to be here.
I have no problem delegating that to Ed because I know he's going to do a fantastic job, and I know if I were doing it, it would be crap. Same with some of the other stuff. Accounting, for example. I happen to have an accounting degree. Can I read a balance sheet and income statement? Can I review my own financials? Can I send out invoices? Can I do all that stuff? Absolutely. Worst use of my time that I can possibly make. Get somebody that can do that. I can look over their shoulder, and occasionally I have to say, hey, maybe change this or change that. And that's fine. Find the marketing person. Is that an outside vendor or is it somebody in your organization? Find the people who can help out. You mentioned coaching, and you coach. I do some of that consulting type stuff. Key pieces. And it's hard sometimes for us to pull the trigger to see the real value there until you pull the trigger and you go, I never knew. There's a whole world out there that I never saw before, that I never understood, that's just unlocking potential.
Mm-hmm. So true. So what is something that you're curious about in your profession right now? What's something that you're excited to learn, something that's changing, that's going on that we should be aware of?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say, when you ask that question is, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. I love to assimilate, get more things, and the best thing that ever happened to me is Audible, because sometimes I have a hard time sitting down and devoting my time to reading. Mm-hmm. But for me, Audible's great because you turn it up to 2.0, you listen to it, everybody talks this fast, and you get used to everybody talking. But being able to listen to different books around mental health, around performance, around furthering your business, for me, it's all about how do I bring in this, what I call foundational elements to any practice or any life, which is your mental and emotional state. How do you really build your personal foundation to be more settled, to be happier where you are right now, to be pleased with what's going on in your business, to be able to go home and not have anxiety and stress and just say, you know what, I'm just happy being who I am, where I am, knowing that there's other opportunities. So for me, I'm looking for a greater knowledge base to, one, bring that to me and to my businesses, but then also to help share that with other clients, to give them tools that they really can latch onto. And I call them sticky notes, right? Everything that we're doing and everything that we present, is there something here that fits on a sticky note that you can stick on there that they're going to peel off and stick on their computer? And one of them says, I belong, right? That means a whole bunch of things. If I can stick that on and if I can work with people to the point where they feel like I belong, then that's making a difference. That's, to me, what I would love to figure out is how do you get more people to understand that? How do we get more people settled in this age? You mentioned social media and all the stuff that goes on with all of that stuff, right? There's such an insidious side of that, and there's such a potential strength in a lot of that as well, depending on how you frame it. That's what I'm interested in, is figuring out those pieces and helping people be more settled with where they are and who they are.
I love it. You brought up two things that I think are foundational gems that are good takeaways from what you shared. And it's one, being present. You'd alluded to it earlier. I think too often, because we're so busy and so consumed by so much, we fail to stop and smell the proverbial roses. It's just being present, not dwelling on the things that are maybe what we just came out of meeting-wise or what we just left and dwelling on that. And it's not focusing on the future, planning and so forth. It's dealing with the time at hand. And we started with that at the very beginning where you were talking about in a conversation. Are you just present and listening and taking it all in? The second gem that I really think is a key to the foundation of a healthy life is gratitude. Are you just grateful for the things that you have? Are you willing and able to acknowledge what's going well in your life? Can you acknowledge that when things are bad in one place, at least you have your health? I can see, I can walk, I can smell, I can taste. That meal today was wonderful. The weather is outside beautiful. I'm dressed nicely. I'm warm. I mean, can you find the things that you're genuinely grateful for because you can acknowledge where you're blessed in your life? And if you've got the ability to be present and be grateful, you've got the start of a pretty good foundation to be happy in life.
A very strong foundation.
Yeah.
I just finished the book, The Gap and the Gain, right? Another great book that talks about that was referred by a friend a couple of weeks ago, and I love the thoughts in there, right? And of course, one of the tools that it advocates along with a lot of other ones is just what you're talking about, and that is at night, 3 things. Write down 3 wins or accomplishments for the day. And I think if you also write down the 3 things you're grateful for, you start finding them.
You do. They come
Instead
out.
of focusing on the stuff that, we as humans, when we are striving to be something more, it seems like we're always poking holes, right? We're always trying to find the weak spot instead of just knowing that, hey, there's this whole dam that's really beautiful. No, we're going to go find and probe until we find the place where there's a hole or where we can make a hole. Because it seems like we thrive on that a lot of times instead of just saying, no, I'm going to put that aside.
As you're sharing that, one of the things that I identify with that is where we're unwilling or unable to celebrate other people's successes. So rather than being grateful for their achievement, we're feeling regret or feel we're missing or lacking because we also don't have what someone else has: the clothing, the car, the house, the relationship. And it all, we put rose-colored lenses on as we look at that nice vehicle, not realizing how much it's going to cost to maintain that or how much it's going to cost to service that. There's costs with everything, right? If you're willing to put in and sacrifice, you also can have excellent health by going to the gym an hour a day. You can also have excellent health if you chose to eat better. It's all choice. And when you look at somebody that's healthy and active, they're that way more often than not because of choices they've made, and you're not there because of choices you've chosen to make that don't put you in that position. And so let's celebrate their successes and be willing and able to be happy for them. And if we're looking at regret, if we're looking at things where we're comparing, like you were sharing earlier, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. So at least frustration. So
absolutely,
very true. All right, I'm going to switch gears on you here. I'm excited for this conversation. We're going to get into a little bit about you, Tad. And I think this is going to kind of bleed back over into business in a moment. But tell us one of the things that's perhaps most misunderstood about you. When someone meets you or whatever, what do they misunderstand?
I would probably say, again, it kind of stems from training a little bit as much as anything, as far as being an attorney and that sort of thing. I'll routinely hear that I'm intimidating or I'm not approachable. If you get into psychology and all those sorts of things, you probably go, Ted, as a kid, you probably had self-esteem problems, or you probably had this, you're probably shy, and yes, 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 and yes, right? And so when people look at that and they think that I might be intimidating or I'm unapproachable or, I'm very much boom, 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 you've got to do it this way. And I am that way, but it's more kind of a learning thing. My personality is such that I'm really not that at all. If I have the opportunity, in most instances, get to know somebody personally one-on-one, I think they quickly figure out that, there's not really a lot there. he's really not that sort of intimidating person. Does he know what he wants? Does he kind of know who he is? Absolutely. But does that mean there's any arrogance or there's any unapproachability? That would probably be the biggest sort of, I'd say, I would term it a misconception. I'm sure you could talk to a bunch of people and say, no, it's no misconception. That's the way he is. But I would forward that as something that's
Well, for what it's worth, Ted, the same thing is said about me. So
are we right there?
we are right there. I totally get it. And yes, when I was younger, I did have self-esteem issues, and I was very pessimistic. And yeah, you nailed it. I could relate to everything you just shared. For many people, the confidence, the clarity that I bring to conversations, especially in a work setting, I think for many makes me unapproachable. And for many, it's very much like this. It's a regimented type thing. And so I think they take from that he's not approachable. So yeah, I kind of think I'm a nice guy and fun, and if you get me in the right settings, I'm a kick to be with, I think. So I am different at home than I am at work, than I am in a social setting. Get me to a hotel or put me on a cruise, and I'm relaxed. I'm a different character, but you put me in a setting where I feel like people are paying for my time or they've paid for my expertise. I'm not going to be the jovial, fun person. I'm going to be that direct. Let's get to the point. Let's be business. So I can relate to that.
Or kindred spirits there.
There you go. I like this. All right. So what's your favorite childhood memory?
Oh boy, a favorite childhood memory. There's a lot that just flashed through my head, but I think I had a group of really great friends in high school.
Okay.
And we did a lot together. Sometimes I would not do some of the things that they did, which I won't share some of them, that they did. Because
I think we're kindred again.
I was also a swimmer throughout my young life and college life. And so I routinely was up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So there was a lot of activities in the evenings that I wasn't able to participate in because I couldn't operate on less than about 6 hours sleep. So, so I would go and avoid some of these things. But one of the favorite ones is we went down to Lake Powell with my brother allowed us to take his boat, which was fantastic. And we just went down. There were 6 of us, high school buddies, and we had a great time. We've got a great shot of us with our tan lines standing in the water that you can see our tan line. And we've actually recreated that a time or two over the years.
Oh, wonderful.
And we still get together. We have an annual Christmas party where we all get together. And so that's very fond memories of my childhood, or with those very good friends and the activities and the things that we did just all through high school.
That's wonderful. And what really impresses me is that you've stayed in touch. That I think is huge. So well done on that. I reconnected with some of my past friends, and it's nice. I can't say that I see them yearly, but I do see them more often in the last few years than I have in years past. So lots of good memories with the local buddies that way. Well,
interestingly enough, 2 of them are my neighbors.
Oh, really?
So we live in the same neighborhood even. And so I get to see them all the time. We do a lot together. So good group of friends.
Excellent. Okay. And regarding swimming, obviously you're an athlete. How do you think those things carry over into business?
I think that the great thing about swimming is it's an individual sport, and you learn to work hard. And I think that carried over, and it was very good for me. On the other hand, it's an individual sport, and you learn to work really hard. And I think that can be limiting. I think that one of the things that's taken a long time to learn is how to work a little bit smarter and not just a little bit harder. And being in the moment and taking your time and relaxing into things a little bit better is something that I've been trying to do and learning as we roll out Blue Novus and as we've been working with Blue Novus. There's so much that's available to us outside of our thinking mind and our I'm going to power through this thing, that if we just relax for a minute and say, you know what, I'm just going to let something come. I'm not going to try to force it. So on the one hand, swimming was very good for me, and it also lifelong of physical fitness, right? I mean, I just continue to be involved and love that. And I've done some coaching with kids, some young athletes, which I just thoroughly enjoy. But I also say that you have to be a little bit careful because you can get into patterns. And one of those patterns was the do-it-yourselfer mentality rather than relying on other people and allowing other people to be part of your journey, part of your ride, and help you accomplish things that you can accomplish better together.
You know, one of the things that stood out from that is this idea of the stressing out before you go into something like a competition. And in business, maybe it's closing a deal, working with a client, and so forth. It's that in sports, I do understand that there's a lot to be said for that relaxed state versus that rigid state. A lot of injuries will occur when you're stressed and anxious versus if you can be relaxed, you'll avoid some of those tense moments and those injuries that can come from that. So as you were sharing that was something I could relate to. Let's move on to a holiday. Pick a holiday and pick a favorite holiday movie that's associated with that.
Well, Thanksgiving probably is a favorite holiday, and obviously the family aspect is huge and the number one. And the number two, why that's a great holiday, is you can always count that Friday, you get Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
To that. Yes.
So the other one's where they're moving, and it's a moving target, and you never quite know when it's going to land. I love that you can count on Thanksgiving.
A 4-day weekend.
Giving you that extra weekend. And of course, one of the things that we do over the 4-day weekend as we get ready for Christmas is watch Christmas Vacation.
Oh.
So, you know, it just ends up being a holiday tradition of let's kick off the holiday season by watching Christmas Vacation, and it's usually on in the background. You're kind of paying attention, you're kind of not. You've seen it enough times, and everybody can relate, everybody can laugh about it. So that's one that comes together.
All right,
for the holiday.
so you've got to give me some scenes from the movie. That is a classic. Pick a scene or two from it.
Well, there's a couple scenes that I can't probably repeat that wouldn't be good for me to repeat from the movie. But, you know, where the Christmas tree goes, that's probably something that's not appropriate to reference when he's taking his Christmas tree in. But the squirrel on the back is obviously a great scene with him running all around the house with that thing on his back and him being panicked. And the swimming pool scene is obviously a great scene where you got Uncle Eddie out on the diving board.
That's right.
That's a classic scene.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie happens to be when he and his brother are out shopping, and the brother happens to be wearing the sweater with the dickie. I have to point out the dickie. I think the dickie is amazing in the movie, and the scene is funny where he's walking down the aisle and he's putting in the dog food. And he's just talking nonchalantly about everything, and he's just putting all these expenses into the shopping cart. So, yeah, I have a lot of fond memories from that particular movie. That's a funny one.
Yeah, and Roger, get yourself something real nice.
That's exactly right. All right, so tell me this. Tell me about someone influential in your life, either professionally or personally, and how they impacted you, what you learned from them.
Boy, there are so many people who've really impacted my lives. And I'm going to go with kind of an odd one that just comes to mind. And it's somebody who I think you might know, but Greg Godfrey.
Oh, okay.
So I worked with Greg Godfrey for a time, and the reason why he came up for me is when I first reached out to him, I knew him years ago when I was a lot younger.
Okay.
But then I got reacquainted with him. And I reached out to him and we went to lunch one time, and I was explaining some of the things that were going on in my life at the time.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and he said to me over lunch, he said, "Ted, you need to change your story."
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was one of those moments where you go, you know what, this is going to be impactful. And I had gone through a couple of businesses that had not gone the way I wanted them to go. I was in a position where I was down on myself. I was thinking, again, comparing myself to where I thought I should be, comparing myself with other people. And to have him come in and be that brave, to just say that to me, it's really what has caused me to be, one of the things that's caused me to be so interested in mental health and grounding and finding that place where you can be who you need to be right now in the moment, and you can forget the baggage. And so that's one that just comes to mind immediately. It wasn't one of those long-term consistent players over time. You know, my dad, my kids, my swimming coach, all those people were important, but just the one that came to me is that one moment.
You know, I appreciate you sharing that with me because I can relate. We all have a story or a narrative that we share. It's how we introduce ourselves, explain who we are, what we do, and it's more than that. It's that conversational narrative that we also kind of lean on, the stories that we tell all the time, that maybe our best friend and spouse is like, okay, I've heard this 10 times. You know, what is that narrative that we are always using to describe ourselves? And for some people, it is a very negative, complaining, life isn't fair, it's unjust, it's problematic. For other people, they celebrate life, and I want to be that person that celebrates life. And the reason why I share it is I abused my family. When I was struggling in business, they were the ones that I would always go to and share that I was struggling and so forth. I wouldn't tell my spouse, wouldn't tell the employees, wouldn't tell the management. I'd go over to the family, and at the family dinner, they'd ask, how are things? And I would vent. Things are this way at work, this way at work. Well, what I started to notice is that was their impression of my work. All they ever heard was the negative at the time. And honestly, I realized I'm doing this an injustice. Work isn't as bad as I'm portraying it. It's not as hard as it is. And so I need to stop burdening them with this stress that they can't do anything about. But I just needed to change the narrative. Exactly what you just described. And it was that epiphany of, really, what's the story I'm telling about myself? And I started to focus more on the things to be grateful for, acknowledging the successes, and holy cow, my life changed. The whole perspective of my surroundings was different. So that's wise advice.
Well, that's powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I think that a lot of us can look back and see those times when we have been down on ourselves. And you might not realize that you are until somebody calls you on it, and you're forced to really look at yourself and say, what am I saying? What message am I portraying? How are people seeing me? And it's wonderful that you share that you've had that experience as well. Because again, it's more normal than abnormal.
Yes. And it was a pivoting moment for me, a huge moment. And my life satisfaction changed because of that, because I could see much more of the things that I was grateful for. And to this day, my life is so much better because of it. So very big change for me. All right, so let's do this. What is a failure you've experienced? You've alluded to a number of things. What's a failure you've experienced, but what did you learn from it?
There's a few of those back there, right? And I think one of the failures that I would look back on is starting a company. And in this company, we were able to get it going, get it launched. We ended up getting contracts with Walmart and Walgreens and Costco and big companies. I mean, we had a lot going on. And we created, at one point with Walmart, we created over 1 million what were called mini movies, where we took user photographs and we dropped them into pre-formatted templates. Well, we were a little bit ahead of our time when we were doing this. And we as a management team didn't pivot. We didn't look at what was out there, what the opportunities and trends were, to really understand where we needed to move to take advantage of what we had built to really be a long-term player in the market. And we raised a lot of money, a lot of capital for that company. And we had some fantastic products. But we just, as a management team, were blind to some of the things that were going on around us to make that change and understand that you can change. You can pivot at any point. It's always available to you. And we get so mired into sort of the routine and the thing that we're doing that we don't stop to sit down again and reflect and just take a moment, because again, powering through, instead of sitting and saying, let it come. So that's the experience that comes to mind.
I like that. It's a good self-reflection. Yeah, very nice. All right, so I'm going to ask some off-the-wall questions of you now. Just tell me what you think of these. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I'm kind of right now partial to Santa Barbara. I think it's a beautiful community. It's not quite as crowded as the rest of California. I used to live in Irvine.
Okay.
And so you go down there and you can't drive anywhere anymore. And you go to Santa Barbara, you drive up the coast a little ways. That would be ideal because I think it's close enough for me still to interact with my family, but not too far away that I wouldn't see them a lot.
Very good. Okay, Santa Barbara. And if you could have, say, coffee or a meal with someone, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Let's see. If I could bring somebody, I think I'm going to go with bring somebody back.
Okay.
In this case. And gosh, I hate to go with kind of an obvious answer, but Abraham Lincoln would be just fascinating. You know, the book Team of Rivals, and talking about how he built that team and how he interacted with people and the important role he served in our country and what he did. I would love to sit down and pick his brain for a while. That would be pretty interesting.
Oh, you've hit someone that's, I would think, right up there with my list as well. Abraham Lincoln lived a life that I can't understand. His wife ended up very distraught after the passing of their son. He was distraught after the passing of his son. He's running the country during a civil war. I mean, the very country you're representing is at odds with one another, and nothing's worse than contention. His generals, he had issues with his generals. I mean, you just can go down the list, and yet somehow he did it. Somehow he persisted, and I have a lot of questions for what was going on at that moment, and how did you do this? The failures that he had leading up to his presidency. Why did he keep going? And he was an attorney, so you can relate to him there. Why the political ambitions? I mean, it's so many questions. He is someone that has life lessons, and I'm sure would be able to empathize with a lot of the trials that many of us face, because he experienced so many of them. So, very good choice.
He changed his story many times over.
He did.
Constantly.
He didn't let the situations define him.
No. What an incredible character. I mean, he really is an amazing character in history.
Yes. Excellent choice. What's your favorite trip you've taken? Where to and why? What did you do there? What would you recommend?
Switzerland was just the year before the pandemic. We were able to go over there, and just an incredible place with we went to Zermatt just to visit there, and then we went over and we stayed in the Interlaken area, and just the beauty to be able to ride a railroad through the middle of a mountain to the top of that peak was just incredible, and some of the sights that we saw there. So that's a favorite vacation. I would go back there in an instant, and my wife and I are actually hoping to go on a river cruise through a large part of Europe there, and then be able to stop in Switzerland.
I like that.
Again.
Viking, I'm assuming.
You know what? They send us stuff occasionally. They sent us one the other day, and I was looking at that and going, I think it's time. What a wonderful way it seems like to see some territory.
The river
and
cruise.
Be right in the middle of the city the whole time. And a friend was talking about how they went on one where they would get off and get on bikes during the day and see the city on bike, which I would absolutely love. My wife would. So.
Oh, nice. So I've got a neighbor that just told me that they're going on one this summer.
Oh, nice.
Viking cruise, yeah. So that's interesting. So with Switzerland, I'm assuming you love the chocolate.
Absolutely. I'm a chocolate guy.
Did you get a Swiss Army knife?
Didn't get a Swiss Army knife.
Okay, good. All right. So here are a few things that I want to do to maybe get your input. Favorite book? You've mentioned a few books. What book would you recommend right now that you've read that struck you, and why? Usually
it's the last one I've read.
Okay.
And I've probably read 40 books over the last 6 months, again, with the aid of Audible, which has been wonderful. Ones that would stand out, that Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, I think is a
Don't know that one.
Very interesting book, talking about tapping into what's outside of us. I quite enjoyed that book. Well worth the read. Again, one that gives you more tips and tools. The Gap and the Gain is one that I think is good for some real practical tools and helping you understand things. The other one, the Choice, was also just very moving and just so a great experience, a painful experience, but a great experience. Edith Eger wrote that one about her time in a concentration camp and overcoming that and becoming a counselor and therapist. That one is also just fascinating.
Yeah, I've read a few of those types of books, and it's amazing to me how, as a prisoner, they're able to maintain some semblance of humanity, dignity, and it's amazing how the books I've read, those few individuals, as they share that story, they speak of intently, consciously choosing to stay positive or optimistic, and that's what in many instances sustains them, gets them through the circle. And it's a horrible, ugly scenario, but somehow they survive it, and I'm always in awe of that.
Yeah, very neat. Victor Frankl's book, of course,
That's right.
Search for Meaning is a
That's
fantastic one there. And,
Very similar one, yes.
and yeah, I choose, I belong, I'm capable. I mean, those are things that you'll see throughout a lot of those types of books.
Exactly. Oh, wonderful. Movies. 3 movies. What 3 movies would you say are your favorites and recommend, and why?
Movies are, unfortunately, it's not usually the last one I've seen. Because we go to see a bunch of movies and they're just not quite live up to the hype.
I would agree with that, actually.
And I'm not a Marvel guy. I just can't quite.
I'm with you there too.
Get
My kids are
with-
big Marvels, but not me.
Yeah. So as I think about a favorite movie, I've seen a lot over the time. I would have to go. I'd have to go with some of the favorites during Christmas. And one of the ones that's been a favorite one in our family is White Christmas.
Okay, good.
So we watch that, of course, every year. And my daughter has watched it, I think, at least 100 times a year, no exaggeration, for a lot of her life, because it was one of those, I think, comfort things for her that she watched over and over again. But that's a good movie. That is a favorite, kind of an all-time classic favorite of mine.
You know what's interesting about that movie is everybody knows the ending, and I don't know that many people are familiar with the storyline, or at least recall. I mean, it's some war buddies going to help their captain.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the idea of it. It's
Yeah.
post-World War II, and the captain has a hotel that's struggling, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to help this captain that was so influential in their lives during the war. And they go up there and do their part to save the hotel. I mean, that's the story.
Yeah, and the best part about it too is, as you read about it, and they filmed it very quickly and did it really quickly. But the scene where Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby do the Sisters Act, where they do the singing and a lip sync, that wasn't scripted in the movie. They were just messing around when they did it, but it ended up being in the final cut of the movie. And so, anyway, I generally, when people ask about movies, I go back to old ones, because we watch a lot of classic movies, and we like that. We like that sort of thing.
Love Danny Kaye, by the way. I enjoy him.
He's classic.
Yes, he is. No, wonderful. Okay. And by the way, movies, I do struggle with them. And Marvel, just to throw this out there, one of the jokes in the family, because I have 2 children that are very big into Marvel. They just love Marvel. I admitted to them that I actually watched a number of the movies and had no idea, after watching a few of them, that they even were related one to another. I had no clue that there was any correlation, that they had anything in common. And they had to point out to me, no, Dad, this is related to that, and this is involved with that. Had no clue. So I am fascinated by it, but I don't get sucked into it. All right. Do you listen to podcasts? You've mentioned a lot about Audible.
I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, because I'm listening to so many books right now. So no
All right.
podcasts.
How about this? If there was a question you thought I would ask you, during this whole discussion. What was it that I haven't asked that I should have?
Maybe right now my favorite sort of analogy.
Okay, what is your
for
favorite
business and
analogy?
life. The realization came to me actually just recently. I enjoy hiking, and I like going up into the mountains. And we have Corner Canyon here and Lone Peak, and
Yeah.
I've been up there many times,
Yeah.
many different routes. And as I started thinking about it, one of the reasons why I did that is because I needed exercise. And coming from a competitive swimming background, I was like, okay, I'm going to make it up this mountain in 30 minutes, checking my watch. Where am I? How long does it take me to get here? Take the picture, drink my water, head back down. And then, well, maybe wear a backpack. And then I'm seeing people out there putting on the backpacks and putting the rocks in and doing all that sort of thing. And it came to me finally. I thought, in my business life, I am always making things difficult. I'm always strapping on the backpack. Then I'm filling it with rocks. Then I'm finding the steepest hill for me to walk up. All with the idea of, this is training. It's going to get me to a point where I can do this thing out there that I don't know what it is. But I'm just going to keep working. And it finally came to me that, you know what? I don't have to carry rocks up the hill. I don't have to wear a backpack. In fact, I don't even have to walk up the hill. I can just go walk a trail. I can just go have an enjoyable time instead of making everything so difficult. And I think a lot of us do that in business, is that we think no pain, no gain, kind of the old school, if it's not rough, you're not getting anywhere, and it's a bunch of crap. I don't have to wear the backpack. I don't have to carry the rocks. I can cut off all this stuff in the past. I can change my story and just say, you know what? I'm just going to go out and enjoy nature. I'm going to enjoy the trail instead of making it hard, making business hard, making life hard, making my family life hard, making anything else hard in my life. Just relax into it.
That is excellent advice and great analogy. I struggle personally with the celebrations of success. I'm always now on to the next thing. So even though that worked out well and that was a success, I'm like on to the next thing, and I wasn't good at pausing and acknowledging and celebrating that success or accomplishment. And now that I'm older and wiser, I try to be more deliberate to enjoy the moment, acknowledge and celebrate. And it's not my natural inclination. It's not my first thing. So I do have to consciously remind myself, we actually did that. Let's celebrate it. But it does make life more enjoyable when you can celebrate a few things. And then the other thing that I'd share with the analogy of making the hike difficult. I mean, going up to Lone Peak, it can be enjoyable. Looking at the surroundings, are you looking at your footing because you're going so quickly and so fast that you're just not even noticing the environment, the fact that there's wildlife around you, the birds, the animals? Or are you just so fixated on the trail so you don't roll your ankle that you're just barreling up the canyon? Enjoy life. Make the most of it. You didn't have to put the backpack on with the rocks and make it a burdensome trip. Just enjoy the hike. And I think that's so true to life itself. I physically did that back when I was in my 30s. I was in excellent shape, and we were snowshoeing, and I wanted to see how much load could I carry and what could I do. It was miserable. I literally almost died on that snowshoeing trip. And now I do the same snowshoeing trip every year, but I do it leisurely. I don't rush. I just enjoy it, and it's a totally different experience. And yet it's the same trail.
Well, and I love what you're saying about watching the trail. You try that. Try that next time you're out biking, riding, running, whatever. Pay attention to how much I'm looking down, because we're always worried about what we're going to stumble over. And because we are. I ran a marathon up at the Wasatch Peak here. Uh-huh. And I tripped 5 times, went down on my face, every time.
Oh, wow.
Through the run. And so a lot of why I look at the ground is you figure I'm going to avoid what's going to cause me to trip and what's going to cause me to stumble. You miss so much, like you're talking about. Are you seeing what's out here? Are you seeing what's available to you? Or are you just so focused on putting one foot in front of the other and getting to the next point that you know every rock and every pebble in the path, but you have no idea what the landscape looks like.
Oh, exactly.
I love what you brought up there.
Yeah, my reality of that is also in driving. When I drive, I'm very attentive to the road, the vehicles around me, as I should be, right? But when I'm a passenger, I daydream. I'm looking at the things, the signs. I'm noticing things around the road that I honestly didn't even see or notice, because I tend to be one of those quicker people on the roadway, so I'm paying a little bit more attention to the drive. And that being the case, I just don't enjoy my surroundings. So when I get to be the passenger, oh, I love it. I get to just sit back and enjoy, take things in. Totally, it's same road. It's the same road, but I get to enjoy the environment a little bit better. So good. All right, so we're going to do what's called a deep dive. I'm going to give you 4 topics. You get to pick the topic, and then we're going to discuss it for a moment.
Okay.
So first one, faith. Second, music. Third, family. The last one is workaholic versus balanced life. So faith, music, family, workaholic versus balanced life.